Okay. Now, bear with us there, guys. Justin will be with us now in a second. There you are. Now would be good.
Sorry about that earlier. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yeah. Hello. Thanks a million for doing this, man.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's been a long time. And this is the perfect time to get people for interviews. Everyone's inside living on the internet. So,
yeah, I will say one thing about the whole pandemic. It's number one, it's a great humbler, but number two, it's people are incredibly generous with their time because all their schedules are free. So we've really benefited from that Film Network Ireland over the last kind of 6 months. So we're really, in a way, very grateful for that. But I think it's a great recalibrator for everybody.
I would do it anyway, just even if we weren't on Corona. You know that, right? I would always make time, but it's a good time too because people aren't traveling as much. So these kinds of things are actually a good way to be social. Other than that, I'd be talking to my dog all day, who sits under my coffee table here in the edit room. But I talk to her a lot anyway. But it's nice to talk to people who can respond in conversation as well. Yeah,
absolutely. What's your dog's name?
Birdie, named after the Boston Celtic Larry Bird. Here she can make a little cameo here. There she is.
Hey. Who's a pretty birdie? Did you watch The Last Dance?
I watched the whole thing. Yeah, that was during a time when basketball was on hiatus, and so it was like my stand-in. I'm a big basketball fan, actually, an NBA fan. Yeah.
I wouldn't be the biggest NBA fan, but certainly it's perked an interest in me. I got totally engrossed and sucked into the show, and I'm gonna be and have been kind of googling and watching a lot of basketball, so I know a little bit more than I did.
A lot of people are talking about how that series got the storytelling involved in that show was dramatic, the way like someone's favorite serialization of, it was a really crazy story and ride, and that they had such access to behind the scenes. My wife, who doesn't particularly like basketball, is now much more of a basketball fan after having watching The Last Dance with me, because I think she get, all you need is, I think, to get close to the characters and start following the human drama of Dennis Rodman, for example, is a character out of a movie, right? And all of them, really. It was a really well told story. And I think that series was able to get a lot of non-basketball fans into it a little bit, at least.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even some of the football teams or soccer teams over in the UK during lockdown, they were being interviewed about what they were watching and what's motivated them and what they engaged with. And they were like, The Last Dance, The Last Dance, The Last Dance, The Last Dance was coming up everywhere. So it's I suppose the thematically, it's not a million miles away dramatically from what they're used to. The Tiger King for sports, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. So everybody, Justin has joined us because it's quite early because we're 8 hours ahead. So what time is it over there? Like 9 a.m.?
Oh no, it's 11 here. I'm on my second coffee, so we're good. We're good. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So you scrubbed up and you brushed your teeth and.
Right. Got my letter from the Board of Health. It was today for the shower for the month, and I made sure to time it out with this because I'm wearing one of my only nice shirts that I have. So, nice. I gotta say, in editing a film, you're typically not dressing well, but editing a film in quarantine, it's like you actually have to put it on the schedule if people are going to be looking at you to dress up. I have this because it's quite cold in the edit right now, but it's different than if we weren't out.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's good that we don't have smell-o-vision. But come here. So yeah, well, I suppose we'll jump right in and talk about let's talk about your childhood.
Oh shoot! Okay, let's go.
So tell me, when was your first kind of conscious recollection of a movie or a film?
Oh
And
man, if you want to go back that far, I watched the film The Wizard of Oz every day after school. Like literally, I would go home, watch it, act out all the parts. I think that's where I kind of got. There was a few films, but my parents told me that that was the one that I like. Literally, just the structure of it got me to understand that stories have a beginning, middle, and end. I think that that's something that even at a young age you can kind of grasp. And then through my teens,
mhm.
I think the films that I got excited about, I had a what little kid growing up in the 80s and early 90s didn't have a Star Wars phase. I drew on to like sagas, things that had like long, like I was really into professional wrestling before I thought it was, before I understood that it was all basically a big soap opera. But what I think I got into was like the actually following the characters across multiple episodes of things. I got into like in the late 80s, early 90s films like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, like just stuff that I grew up in a middle American kind of suburb in Pennsylvania until I was 11, and then in Michigan, which is even more middle American, like that didn't really have art films or foreign films or independent. So my early childhood with film was a lot of the stuff that you would consider the popular American stuff, the Jaws, E.T., Ferris Bueller. Again, I think was one of my favorites. You know what it was too? It was the idea, and other filmmakers have done this. His talking right to the camera was something that just was like, oh, you're allowed to do that? You can do that? There were things. And then when I was 14 years old, I went to see Pulp Fiction.
14.
I was 14. I had to sneak in because my parents wouldn't let me see it. And then when I saw Pulp Fiction, I had another like holy shit moment where I was like, wait, you're allowed to do that? You're allowed to do this? You're allowed to do this?
Yeah.
And like telling a story out of order, making something 2.5 hours with 15 major characters. And then I think it was like, you know how there's gateway drugs where you get into something, but then it leads to everything else. I think the gateway drugs for me were like that film, and of all things, Barton Fink by the Coen brothers.
Wow. Okay.
I don't know
How did
why.
that slip in? Like somebody left a cassette there or something, or was it a conscious thing?
I saw it at the video store. And I was like, what is this? You know what it was?
What?
Fargo. When I was 15 or 16, came out in my small town, and it won everything. And I was like, this is the weirdest movie I've seen. And I was a teenager when Fargo came out. And from Fargo, I asked my dad, I'm like, have you heard of these guys? Who are these Coen brothers? They're very strange. I had no idea you could make a movie so strange. And my dad goes, actually, yeah, I've heard of them. They did this amazing comedy called Raising Arizona and this really cool Irish gangster movie called Miller's Crossing. And I rented them. And then I rented Barton Fink. And Barton Fink had an ending that still to this day, I still get chills thinking about. And I was like, okay, so there are filmmakers out there that can actually say something that's not just, that bleeds into like your real life or leave open-ended questions. And I discovered in a strange way that there was different ways to tell stories than just like the Star Wars 3-act structure, good versus evil, the entertainment films, I guess you could say, like the big budget. And I guess it was Pulp Fiction and Tarantino's first film, which I then found one copy of in my like local video store on VHS, watching that with my dad, and my dad being like discovering it with me, him giving me a couple other Coen's films, and then my high school English professor giving me all of Kubrick's movies and saying, you should start watching these. And that really got me into photography and music in
So,
films, right?
so okay, so that's like being handed a Rubik's cube, a creative Rubik's cube, right?
But just imagine only seeing, you know, the big commercial Hollywood blockbusters and then being sat down and said, "Hey, I didn't know you. If I didn't know, don't know if you know this, but you can also make things like that." And you watch Fargo, and you're like, "What the hell is that?" And then Pulp Fiction, and then Reservoir Dogs, and then Rashomon was shown in my high school class,
Wow.
and from my English teacher, and from Rashomon. I did this thing in high school where if I liked something, I watched everything by that person, and then I read interviews and said, well, what did they like? And it was like this so I find out that like Tarantino likes Kurosawa. I watched everything by Kurosawa, and I got into, and then I found out that the Coens, or I forget, one of the filmmakers I was watching really liked Antonioni. And then I started renting all of Antonioni's films. And then my English professor is like, you should really get into these 70s exploitation films from Australia. And then I would go into that. And my brain just works where when I get into something, I want to just complete it and just see everything from it. So, for example, you guys have the Criterion channel out there?
Yeah, you can buy them on DVD. DVD. And
No. But the channel, like on your Apple TV, where they screen stuff, and you can. Oh, okay.
No, it's coming
so
soon.
Basically, so like the label that makes all those films, they do a channel where you can watch all these great films, and they put them by director. You know, kind of. And I watched one Maurice Pialat film last week, and now I'm going through his whole filmography, trying to figure out. But here's the thing. When I was in high school, I was watching because I loved photography. I loved music. I loved theater. I directed theater a lot when I was in high school and college. My degree in college is actually in theater, and
wow.
I did film as well. But I liked all of those things together. I was also an athlete, but I wasn't very good, so I had to find something else to do. And I really enjoyed the idea of like having the ability to like make something that other people could see. I would leave and it would be there. And you know, plays were great, but they're gone as soon as the run ends and no one else can see them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I loved writing. I was very kind of not a loner, but I moved around a lot. I've lived in like 7 or 8 different places growing up. So I didn't always have a lot of friends. So writing was something I could do to still feel like I was connecting with people or sending it in to people. And so I would write a lot. And then I found the evolution came from writing a bunch to doing theater, then to realizing that like I could also be social in my directing of actors and also talking to photographers and musicians and make something that actually could stay there forever and like, you know, not just be gone and done. So it was a combination of moving around a lot, having one constant, which was what I was reading or what I was writing or what I was watching, and then just a couple pivotal people in my life giving me like just someone handing you a great book that from an author you've never read, right?
Yeah.
When I was young, I read one book by Kurt Vonnegut and then read everything I could by him. I did the same. My little brother, who you met in Galway, when he was a skateboarder kid and not really interested in literature, he's now a very successful children's author. I handed him a Kurt Vonnegut book. He read it. And then after that, I saw him a year later and he'd read every Kurt Vonnegut book he could get his hands on. Maybe it's in our genes, but I think what happened to me was that I really liked something, and then a few very important, influential people in my life, like my father and a couple of my teachers, handed me different things of the same medium, like different films, and were like, you know that these are also movies, not just like Star Wars, but the Coen brothers. And I watch it, and it was like a mystery to figure out. I was like, you can do that too? I had no idea. And then from there, it was just a snowball where then I was watching everything. And then as I was learning about people like Tarantino and the Coen brothers, they were making new films, you know, like The Big Lebowski came out when I was in high school, and I went to go see it with like 5 friends, you know, in the theater. I saw it in the cinema. I had no idea what the hell I was watching the first time, you know? So I think that from from those experiences, and also when you live in a small town that's not a big city, that you don't have access to amazing art all the time. You can't walk out your door and go see whatever film you want, or whatever, like a play or a concert. If you do find something, it becomes like the holy grail, right?
Yeah,
the fact
absolutely.
that I discovered the Coen brothers section of the local Blockbuster Video, rest in peace, video stores, made me feel like I had something that nobody else had. And then I found the one shelf with the foreign films, and I didn't even know what they were. I just brought them home every weekend, because this was a time in the middle of suburban Michigan when there would be 30 copies on the shelf of the new Julia Roberts film, and one copy that was like 10 years old and maybe didn't work very well and was maybe all fuzzy, of like Akira Kurosawa's like Dreams. And I would bring that one home, and I'd find these weird films I couldn't pronounce the titles. And from that, I was just like aching to get anything out of what the normal, all my friends were watching, because I just felt like I'd seen all that. And that kind of led me to wanna go study it in college, and then ultimately in film school.
Yeah, I suppose there's an element of unearthing something kind of new and valuable, and being an educator and passing on that, these wonderful manuals of how to interpret life to other people. I mean, ostensibly that's what being a filmmaker is educating and empathizing and exploring the human condition. I'm not surprised that there's like a massive theatrical background there.
I'm also a teacher, by the way. I teach film in Guatemala City. I helped start a film school, but like teaching is
how important is education? How important is education?
I mean, look, like we can get into this when we talk about the new project that I'm editing right now. I would not be in post-production on my third feature right now had it not been for one of my students. Literally, one of my students is the reason why I made this film.
Right.
And I shot it in his hometown in the north of Guatemala, where his family is from, and has one of the highest murder rates in all of Central America. And one day after class, he invited me to come home to see his town for the weekend after class.
Jesus.
And I walked around the town for about 2 days with him and talked to people from the town. And I told him, I was like, we have to make a movie here, man. There's never been a movie made in this town. And I mean, we can get into how, I know that comes later in the chat about how that film came about, but I owe my current status of my career as a filmmaker to teaching.
Yeah.
Not to mention all of the great films you get to rewatch with your students and see if they hold up. I'm going to show you one of the first films that made me want to be a filmmaker. And then as you're watching, you're like, I wonder if they're going to like it, or I wonder if I was just on something that day. And a lot of them do hold up. And but I think that when you get so busy in the business of making films in your older age, you forget that you become a better filmmaker by continually watching cinema. Yeah. And not only watching it, but having to explain it to a new generation of people. So every year when I go back to teach kids in Guatemala, I get to rediscover the films that made me, like, brought me to my first works, to get me to make my first films. And that keeps you young, I think, as a filmmaker. I think that there are directors out there who I used to revere, who I can't watch their films anymore because they don't get out, and I don't think they watch movies anymore. And this is no dig on Coppola, because I think actually he's made 2 or 3 of the greatest films of all time, if not more than that. Yeah. But I haven't been able to sit through a film he's directed. I don't even know if he's still making films, but I just think after a certain amount of time, you lose touch. And I think there's multiple ways to stay hungry and young. Like Scorsese seems to still have whatever he had when he was a young guy. Say what you will about if you like his new films, he's just always inhaling films, I think. And it's up to everyone. Scorsese doesn't have a wine label and a wine vineyard.
Yeah.
If I had a wine vineyard, I'd probably watch less films and be drinking more wine. But all I'm saying is that for me personally, teaching has led me to much better career in my own work. Because
so it brings you, like, there's an authenticity to that. So it brings you back to the impulse, the initial impulse.
Not only that, but constantly having to remind yourself what about films makes you excited and get up in the morning. They're really tough days as a filmmaker, especially where I am, trying to find all the funding myself or with my friends for the films. We don't have a system in our government that like pays for films. There are very hard days, and teaching allows me to remember why it's worth it. So I think for me personally, it reminds you not only that, but it keeps you having to articulate what's working about a film to a bunch of people who are just discovering it, makes you call yourself out on your own mistakes in your own projects. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, question your own, maybe not bullshit, I wouldn't go that far, but reinforces your own authenticity, right?
Yeah, I think so. But also, I think we take for granted sometimes certain things in our own work because we're rushed. And what I think it does make you slow down and make you continue to be a student. I'm relearning these films with my students, and I think if you never lose that ability to continue to watch films like a film student, whether you're in school or not, being like, okay, I'm watching this, but I'm not watching it as someone who is enjoying it. I'm watching it as a craftsman. I want to figure out what they're doing. Like, it just trains your eyes to continue to watch a film analytically. The way I talk to my wife about this right now, because she's writing for television, and I constantly we watch film and TV together, because she likes to do this game where she tries to figure out the structure of a show just for 3-act structure. And I say, you have to learn to watch things the way that a chef eats food. They're not eating it as a customer, they're eating it as a chef. They're like, okay, this tastes good, but why? How do they make it? And I think if we can look at it, or the other metaphor I like is when you want to go live in the house, walk into a house like you're the architect, not as you're the guest. So you can actually, as you're enjoying the house, look like, all right, but the color scheme, how did they do this? How did they do this? But when you're a teacher, even if you just mentor someone and show them films, that part of your brain is always activated. Mm-hmm. And I think it gets lazy late in your career if you don't, because you're just writing something and you're making it because you've got to have a script into your producer because you're shooting in a month, right? You got to have a new scene. You might forget about the muscle memory of that. It just keeps you in shape, mental shape.
Yeah, it keeps you sharp. Can you ever really enjoy the meal once you know how the sausage is made? Is it possible after you've when you've deep dived into it, insofar as where when the tropes are coming up, when certain structures, the hero's journey, blah blah blah.
You can, but it's harder.
Yeah.
So here's the thing I tell my students is that once we take this class, you're not going to be able to just watch movies passively. You're going to always see everything working. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing. Every year I see 1 or 2 films where I am unable to see the gears working behind the screen.
Yeah.
And that's when you have found a really great film. I saw 2 films in the past year that have done it, just 2. But those 2 are worth it because you've really found something great. And it's a little depressing because it makes me really dislike, I'd say 90% of what I watch. It makes finding something good very much harder.
What did you enjoy this year? What do you think? What was refreshing for you?
I'll tell you, in television, Normal People was something that I didn't see the gears moving. I was just in it. I watched it with my wife straight through. Like, I think on every night we watched one until it was over.
Yeah, it's incredible.
The reason why, though, is that I feel like Lenny looks at a film I know he didn't direct all of them, but the way the film was made, or I look at it as a film in parts, or the show, you're so wrapped up in the characters and the performances and the rhythm of everything. I just felt I was in good hands, and I wasn't looking for a structure. And the film, the book, I heard Lenny say on once that, you know, not a lot happens. So you really do have to pay attention to the subtleties of the human behavior. And when you have something with not huge plot twists in every episode, and it's more just about observing these people, you can kind of disappear in it, and you can kind of forget about the mechanisms working and just enjoy the filmmaking, enjoy the performances. That's one in the past year that has been really, really nice for me. How
good is that casting, right?
Wonderful casting, wonderful casting. I also love when I can go to a film and not recognize one actor in the project. I recognized one because I had met her at the FLA, but the two leads I had never seen in anything before.
I think that was part of the magic, I guess.
It was, and you know, it was one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to go to a new country and make a new film in a different language and in a country without big movie stars, is that I was able to really find authentic people who had never acted, and some who had but hadn't been in much that you'd seen, in order to make a film that feels like you're watching the real people. It's a thing of mine. Not that I don't like films with big, great I'll watch Daniel Day-Lewis, and I'll watch Michael Shannon, and I'll watch my favorite actors in absolutely anything. But it also is a nice, refreshing surprise sometimes to see something where you don't recognize anybody. But I think that helped quite a bit to normal people's success. I think is that you really believe these kids. In films, I saw. There's a film that I actually would recommend to everyone to watch without reading a thing about. It was the first film to ever win an award at Cannes, directed by a woman of color. It's called Atlantics.
Okay. Yeah.
Netflix bought it. I believe it's available on Netflix everywhere.
I've seen
but
it.
I think it's the single most surprising film I've seen in about a year or two. Just in the sense that, like, I thought it was going to be one thing when I was watching it, and when it isn't what I thought it was going to be, it was such a beautiful surprise that I watched it like the first week of the pandemic in March, and I haven't stopped thinking about it since then. So when something like that can make you forget about all the mechanics behind filmmaking, and you can't see it and it's invisible, you know that you're in the hands of someone who's really found a way to surprise you and make it new. And that's what I'm looking for in anything that I do or anything that I watch. And it's hard to do the more you watch films, obviously. Mm-hmm. It's the sacrifice you make, though, to becoming a filmmaker, is that you have to maybe be able to recognize things. Less surprises you, I guess. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Did you have a mentor figure that kind of has been on the periphery all the way up to where you are now?
You know, I had a few. In high school, I had a English teacher who was a cinema fanatic, and I never had him for a class. He was just a guy that I would see in school and talk movies with. He was an older fellow. He was on the brink of retirement. And I would sometimes, I'm going to brace you for this, I wasn't very popular in high school. So I sometimes chose to take my lunches to his office and eat with him and just talk about movies. And he started just saying, hey, I'm going to let you see a film. You're not going to understand it. It's going to be difficult. Mm-hmm. It's going to, the first one he did was this what he just saw that I was really passionate about filmmaking. Mm-hmm. And he handed me a DVD of The Seventh Seal by Ingmar Bergman. And he's like, Justin, watch this. I watched it and I had no idea, you know, I was 16 years old. I had no idea what I was watching. But I knew I liked it. I knew there was something there, but I just didn't understand it. And he told me this thing, I'll never forget it. He said, don't be afraid that you don't understand what you're seeing. Like, stick with it and like embrace the fact that you don't know what's going on.
Embrace the not knowing.
Not only the not knowing, but not understanding. Like, clearly that movie's about something. It was just over my head. It just went boom. But I don't think you get better or smarter or more talented by sitting in the kiddie pool. You have to go into the deep end, right? And drown and struggle. And so I watched Wild Strawberries. He sent me that one. My freshman year of college, I'm now 18, and I'm writing him every day. And he's like, what? I was like, what can I say? He said, watch Wild Strawberries. That was a little easier. And it got a little easier. But I was so taken with his like trust in what I wanted to do. He's like, just keep going. And he kept sending me films that were inexplicable to me. I had no idea what I was watching. And eventually I got there. But again, it was him. And you know what's funny? I didn't really want to take too many classes my senior year of high school. I wrote a big term paper on Kubrick, and he oversaw it. So he actually finally was my teacher my very last semester of high school. I wrote him a paper, and it was more of an analysis. It was more of an analysis of what do you call it? Like the visual, like his Kubrick's camera tracking through different films from his black and white all the way to his final movies. Except for his last one, which came out my freshman year of college, I believe. But he was the big one. And then I went to college, and I had another one. I had a professor of theater in college who taught me everything I know about directing on stage. And I to this day use some of his theater terms to teach my kids film in Guatemala. And I go back about once every other year to where I went to college, and he's still there. He's still the head of the directing program in the theater program there. And I've guest spoken in his class, but I still credit him about the way that he saw directing theater. I apply it all to film. But he's a guy that, I still use his workbook. Obviously, it's for theater, but I think I took all the things that work for directing visually on camera, and his terms, he broke down language of how to talk to actors in ways that I still use today. And I teach my students. Like he made up film terms that don't exist, and I teach them to my students in Guatemala, and they're like Googling them. They're like, I don't understand. I go, you're not going to find this in a book. This is my weird professor in college.
Yeah, this is the secret sauce.
Yeah, but what's funny is he just had a name for something that everyone else does. He just used a new language of terms that I think just hit me in the right way. But the thing is, you're going to get a lot of people as you grow up in the arts telling you and teaching you things. I think the thing that helped me was learning that I didn't have to listen to everything. I took the pieces that applied to what I'm trying to do, and I put them in, because ultimately they're there to give you their wisdom, but you have to apply it to the project you're doing. And I think the time that in film school, I had a mentor who was another professor who was one of the wisest men that I've ever met. And he was from Hungary. He is from Hungary. He would always, the day I think that I graduated from his mentorship and became a peer is when I decided not to take a note on my thesis film of his and go the other direction and say, I know that you believe this, but you're wrong. And he really respected me. He's like, I was trying to make the film better in the version of it that I would make, but I see that you want to make it yours. And I always loved him for that, is that he liked, we're still friends to this day. He's retired many years now. But he
embraced your artistic integrity, right?
He basically said to me that I made a huge mistake on my thesis film, and that 3 scenes at the beginning didn't work, and they needed to get moved to the end. Just chronologically, they didn't work, and I needed to pretend that they took place at the end and not at the beginning for the film to work. And I said, you're wrong, and here's why. And even if these scenes aren't perfect, they still are an imperfect representation of the story I want to tell. I move it to the end. Maybe the film is better in your terms, but it's not the story I wanted to make. So I appreciate your note, but I disagree with it 100%. And he was like, respect. And he honestly gave me almost all of the things that I have now as a filmmaker. So I didn't rub it in his face, but that film ended up, playing Telluride and Sundance, and but I think that was the moment where he and I think became closest, was when I said, no, you're wrong, to the guy who I think I credit for the way that I see filmmaking. Yeah.
Did you? So that was that on your grad film from UCLA? Yeah.
Yeah, The Replacement Child.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the one that it played at. It premiered at Telluride Film Festival, and then played in Torino in Italy, where I met Lenny, because he had won that year with Garage, as you say, and that was the one that won the Student Emmy Awards and everything. Like, that film was the reason why I got my first feature, that short film. So,
what was it like being blessed with a level of success early on? Was it a help or a hindrance?
I'll take any success, early, middle, late. It didn't feel like it, because it was still very difficult. The fact that I had worked so hard those 4 years of film school to make something, I made 4 shorts, and the thesis film that I graduated with at film school at UCLA ended up winning the best of the year series at the end of the year for the students, and that got me a lot of meetings with agents and managers and lawyers and producers and everything, and that was great. But it was overwhelming. And even though I did a lot of talking to people and meeting everyone and keeping their info, I still feel like I could have done more. I tried, while working part-time jobs after film school, to go to any festival that invited me, so that I could meet people. And actually, a year and a half into traveling with the short film that I made, I had a screening in Los Angeles where I met the couple that would end up financing my first film.
Wow.
But it took almost 2 years of going to festivals with the short film to actually and having all these meetings that ended up being very pleasant and lovely, but didn't go anywhere. Nothing happened, right?
Yeah.
And then and I won the short, won all these awards, and it was great. I think it's not just success in that sense. It's then knowing how to use the attention in order to get your next thing a little bit further along than it would had you not had these people looking at you for the couple weeks after you win something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, hindsight is quite the thing. What do you think? What was it that brought you to your first? What was the inception of your story behind your first feature? Where did that come from?
The girlfriend, the one. Yeah.
Well, how many first features did you make?
Well, I didn't hear feature. Sorry, I thought you might have meant short film. So Girlfriend, my first film, came out of an idea I had, because my short film, The Replacement Child, takes place all in my hometown where my family still lives, in the suburbs of Boston. And I used, in a very small role, a young man with Down syndrome who has always wanted to be an actor. He did theater with me in high school, and he was very funny in the scene, and he was very charming in front of the camera. At one of the screenings of the film, 2 producers came over to me and said, who was that actor? I would watch an entire movie about that guy. And I go, Evan, my friend with Down syndrome, he's just an actor from my high school who I just put in that part because he's a friend of mine. They're like, yeah, no, he's really charming. And so I still had a couple festivals left to go to in Europe, actually. So I used my Europe trip to kind of brainstorm and think I should maybe write something small for my first feature that I could do at home or nearby places where I have help, right? Like free places to keep the crew, friends who would want to help, local businesses I've been going to since I was a little kid that want to maybe donate food or help with something. And so I said, okay, well, what if I could come up with a cool story that took place in our neighborhood about a young man with Down syndrome, write it very short. You know, the script was 77 pages, if you can imagine.
Wow.
And kind of figure out a way to use as much of the stuff I have in my neighborhood, in my town. The locations all are houses and businesses nearby that I knew would let me shoot. And I still thought this still has to be a story I want to tell. It has to be about something that I care about. So I came up with a fictional story of a young man with Down syndrome who inherits some money after a family tragedy, and uses it to pay the bills of a woman who is about to lose her house. And this woman is a woman he went to high school with, who he's always been in love with, and all he wants in return is to be in a relationship with her. I just thought, you know, the housing market had just crashed. It was the great financial crisis of 2008, 2009. And I was like, let's write that into the story. Under what circumstances could my friend Evan be dating someone in a mutually loving kind of interest, like, relationship? And I thought, well, let's try it. So I wrote it, and people really responded to it. The hardest thing about it was actually convincing Evan not to be in the film. All he wants to do is act, but him and his mother to be okay and comfortable with the subject matter of the script, because the film is a very adult film. It's about human sexuality and human frailty and selfishness versus selflessness. And there's a lot of violence and there's sexual content, and it's very dark in places. You know, it's not a very I think there's hope in the film, but it's a very bleak and almost challenging film in a lot of ways. I think the subject matter.
It's in no way cynical, though. I think it's an important character exploration of how we perceive the weak in our society, and what true love really is, and how people can be manipulated.
Exactly. The thing that got me excited about it was, like, Evan is a very good person. You know, he always sees the best in people. He's very selfless. And when he's one of the only people you'll ever meet that 100% of the time means what he says and says what he means. There's no subtext. If he's happy to see you, he's actually thinking, I'm very happy to see this person.
Yeah.
If he's upset, he'll tell you he's upset. And it's very rare to find a person in your everyday life that is exactly what they seem to be. They are saying they're happy. They're saying they're sad. They're saying they love you. They're saying they don't like you, right? Yeah. And I was like, well, what if I put that person in a world with all this human frailty, deceit, lies, jealousy, and manipulation? How could someone who's like 100% human kindness do in that kind of environment? Watching that unfold throughout the course of a 90-minute film, to me, was like, okay, now I'm in. Now I want to see this. I want to see what would happen if 100% like selflessness and generosity in a human who never lies, he always tells you exactly how he's feeling, would fare when human beings are not set up to be like that. We can't even sometimes tell the truth about how we're feeling. When you see someone at the cafe, how you doing today? I'm good. How are you? Maybe you're doing absolutely shitty that day. You know, like we can't. But like, if Evan walks into a cafe and someone says, "Hey, Evan, how you doing?" He'll be like, "Well, really bad. My mom is sick. This girl won't email me back, and I just got rejected from another play that I auditioned for." You're like, whoa, but that's him. So when I saw that was him, and someone said I would watch a whole movie about him, I'd be like, I would too. So sometimes you just have to be aware of what's in front of you and say, could this be a movie? Could this be something? Because it's usually better than something that you can make up out of your own mind, you know?
So it was by, I suppose, fate, I guess, pushing you in that direction, would you say?
fate, but also just being aware of what you have in front of you. I think if I was not paying attention, I'd be like, no, screw that. I'm not going to make a movie about Evan. I have this really cool like spy mystery thriller I want to do.
Yeah.
But no, literally, when the universe presents you an opportunity, I think success happens when you see it and you listen to it, because it happened so far in every one of my films. I've been trying to make this one thing, and this other thing hits you in the face.
Yeah, like literally grabs you. Yeah.
Like, for example, I've been trying to make this film for like 5 years now about this pop star. Yeah. I've been making this. It's been like a passion project of mine. But when this Guatemalan like female gang film came to me on a platter, I was like, I pushed away the pop star movie. And, you know, I can't imagine having done it over this Guatemalan film right now. So it is fate, but like, it's not as much as you'd think. It's more being aware of what you have around you, not only the people, but the stories that are around you, and using those, because I think sometimes as filmmakers, because it takes such passion and drive and discipline, we get tunnel vision a lot. And we are working on something for 2 years, that has to be the thing that we do next. But I know so many friends who are successful, who have been trying for 10 years, and the thing that breaks their careers is this thing that they just discovered on the side while they were working hard on this other thing. And I swear to God, it's saved my career at least 3 times now, being open to what else is there when you're working.
Well, it's that John Lennon thing, isn't it? Life is what happens when you're busy making other plans, right?
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it, right? But I think it applies to also a life in film, right? Because you could be making something right now that in 3 years the world won't need. The world won't want to see it. Yeah. You know? Something that you think is very edgy and pushing the envelope right now, and a little bit like taboo, in 3 years from now, people will be like, oh yeah, that's not a very, very big deal, you know? Especially with the way that things are going in what you can see now on television, you know? So I think you have to always be nimble. And it's another thing that I think separates filmmakers, I think, that I love, that have long careers, that I study the way they go, is that they always seem to be able to pivot when there's something more interesting than the thing they're working on to go do.
That drags them kicking and screaming in the other direction.
Yeah, like you would see like Wong Kar-wai, for example, right? Spend like 5 years on a project, and then he ended up throwing out 70% of it, and just that 30% that was working ends up being his film. You know, one of his best films, Chungking Express, was a short story in a bigger project that wasn't working. So he took it out, and he's like, I'm going to make this my film. This happens all the time. It happens in casting. I've auditioned 40, maybe even more, maybe 50 or 60 people in Guatemala who are professional actors for the main male lead in my new film, and they were all actors playing like a kid who's involved in a lot of gang violence. And then I went back and looked at all of the kids I met when I was in the town, just prepping and interviewing and doing my research, and I just kept looking at this one kid who had helped tell me some stories and about his town, and I was like, how about that kid goes in the movie? Yeah, he's the lead in my film. He's never been on film once. He's never acted in his life, and he's the lead male in my new project. But this was after seeing 7. I got to get the right number, but it's definitely over 50 professional actors for the lead male in the film I'm working on now, who's this kid who's involved in a gang in this little town trying to get out. He wants out, but he doesn't have a family. His only family is the gang. And I just kept looking at this kid who kind of was one of the people who helped me like learn about the neighborhood. Yeah. And he was kind of from that world. I think he'd probably been into some trouble in his life in the past. And then I kept looking at him because I did video interviews of everybody that I met when I was there. And I kept looking at him. And like, that's the thing, is that I think you say it's just fate. It's not just fate. It's doing all the hard work and then being open to anything happening. And I think that could apply to which project you pick, but also the people you work with, or the people you cast, or the subjects that you pick, you know?
Okay. I might touch on casting there and just go back to Girlfriend. How do you, you spoke about Evan there, and that, you know, that oasis in the creative desert of just kind of, okay, well, I have to do this. It's a different kettle of fish, obviously, trying to entice bigger names. Now, you had some of the younger cast were like quite big names in terms of tentpole movies that you got in, and obviously Amanda Plummer as well. How did that all come together?
Like, how did the known actors become part of the project?
Yeah, how does that like? How did that work for you? Some filmmakers here might be interested in that. What carrots did you have to put on sticks to get those people?
Okay, well, I'll go one by one through the three. So the three you're talking about are Amanda Plummer from Pulp Fiction and The Fisher King.
Shannon, yeah.
Shannon Woodward from Westworld, yes. And at the time, she was on a show called The Riches, and then after our film, she did a show called Raising Hope. So she's been on a lot of television shows. And then Jackson Rathbone from the Twilight films and The Last Airbender, right? Those are the three you're talking about? So they're all very different. Shannon came about from just casting, auditions. This was a time, like I said, during a very bad economic downturn. There weren't a lot of films being made. And I showed the script to a casting director friend of mine, and he's like, I know you don't have almost any money for this film, but it's a really good script. And Evan is just phenomenal. He had seen Evan in my short. It's like, why don't we just open up an open casting for this movie? There are very few roles out there right now in independent films that are like female leads that are complicated and more than just the girlfriend. I know the film's called Girlfriend, but Shannon Woodward's role in the film she is the lead. The film is about her and Evan, you know, and it's a very complicated story about a girl who is in complete disarray in her life and need of financial help, and here comes this almost guardian angel offering her to pay her rent and keep her from her house being taken away, but you know, he wants something in return that she's not sure whether she has the ability to give him, which is a real loving relationship, because she doesn't know if she's attracted to him and she's not in love with him in that way that he wants her. So that role, I think, attracted a lot bigger actors than we ever could have thought. We thought we were going to have to just do you know any good actors that are your friends type of situation. But after like 3 weeks of casting, you wouldn't believe the names that would come in for it. We didn't end up going with. Some actors that I'd seen and been big fans of in other films came in. Some actresses that, for one reason or another, maybe the schedule didn't work out, or they weren't the exact fit with Evan. We ended up going with Shannon, and she also was a name actress at the time who I'd seen and stuff and was very excited. She happened to be the best that came in, I think, for the role. But I was like going to coffees with some of the bigger name actresses that wouldn't audition. You know, their agents will be like, hey, my client really loves your script, but she's not going to come in and audition. and I was like, okay. So I went to coffee with some, but you know what I told them at the coffee? I would say, hey, I understand your agent said you don't have to audition, but this is a labor of love for me. This is something that I'm making with my bare hands. I'm putting some of my own money into this film. I really don't feel comfortable casting someone across from my friend Evan without at least one audition. So I totally appreciate if you don't want to come in because your agent thinks you're too famous for this role, but I don't care. And I respect if you don't want to come in. And I'd say 9 times out of 10, they came in and auditioned, which much to the dismay of the agents weren't happy when they got their client got back from the meeting with me and be like, yeah, I'm going into audition. And he's like, I just told the guy that you're not supposed to, but like I had the power there. Here's the thing. A lot of times with independent films in the United States, your financing is dependent on who you cast. And only if you get a certain level of actor will the money come. I was in the weird situation in this film where I had a financier to give us the money for this in very small. I'm talking like, this is like, I've seen short films made for bigger budgets than the budget we made a Girlfriend on. But the power I had was I didn't need to cast a star in order for the money to come. I had the money. So I wanted the best person for the role. So I had the ability when agents would call me and say, she'll come in, she'll meet with you, but she won't audition. I was able to go, okay, sorry, click. Like, of course, I don't think I've ever been in that situation since. But in this first film, I was making it for so little that even if I cast someone that no one had ever seen before in a film, I had the money. I had the money because it wasn't a lot. Big making the first film, make it for to help show the world what you want artistically. You have to compromise. It may change the entire trajectory of your career. So even if you have to make it for less money than you want, make it for as cheap as you can with as few people telling you what to do. And I wasn't in the place, and I don't mean this disrespectfully to anyone, but I wasn't in the place to hear from any agent that their client wasn't going to come in and audition. It just wasn't. So if you didn't come in, you didn't get the role. If you didn't come in and audition, you were crossed off our list. And I don't think I've ever had that power ever since. but I don't think that it was ever more important than it was for my first film, because it was my first opportunity, my only opportunity to show the world what I wanted to do for the first time, you know? After that, you have a track record and people can see your work. For my next film, they'll have 3 pieces to look at and say, do I want to work with this person? You know? Quick thing about Jackson Rathbone. So he was a friend of my producers, the people who brought the financing to the film. They had gone to school with him, and he was very interested in transitioning into also a producer and a musician. So we attached him, and he was really the most important part for our financing. The people who financed the movie they're like, cast anyone you want, as long as Jackson is in the film from his fame from the Twilights, you can do whatever you want with the rest of the parts. So it was like, great. And, you know, I met with Jackson. He was very good. He understood the story. We gave him a co-producer credit on the film. Everyone was happy. And him being attached allowed me to have money and the ability to cast whoever I wanted in the other roles. With Amanda Plummer, it was a very unique LA story where I was sitting next to her at a birthday party, at a dinner, and we just started geeking out about movies and started talking about, I don't know what it was. We just were talking about French films. She's an Asian cinephile. Like, she's seen everything from Korea and Japan. So I knew a little bit about that. We started this. I'm sorry to name drop, but this is why I think it worked. The dinner was for Wim Wenders. He was in LA. Wow. He was in LA, and I was working on a project with his producer, a different project that actually never got made. But she invited me to come to this dinner for Wim and be Paris, Texas, and Wings of Desire. I don't care what I'm doing tonight. What's going to do tonight? I'm going to this dinner. And she seated me next to Amanda Plummer. So imagine being like a year out of film school, having just a little short film and sitting at this table like, oh my God. It was like a who's who of German and Asian cinema and Amanda Plummer at the table. So I said, I'm an idiot if I don't at least try to make friends with the woman directly seated to my left, who happens to be Honey Bunny from Pulp Fiction. So I started talking about movies, and then out of nowhere, she invited me to come watch films at her house the next week. she's just that kind of person. You might have met her at the Flaw, right? When she came.
I did. Yeah, I had a chat with her for about an hour.
Yeah, I think she did a masterclass at the Flaw the year that girlfriend played, right?
Yeah, she was there. I had a chat with her.
Right. So
time.
you know,
she was lovely. She was lovely. Look, really lovely.
You more so than almost any famous person you might have ever met, right? Like she's an alien in that respect. Like she talks to the person who's serving her coffee like they're her niece. Like she's got. That's why I think she connected so well with Evan. She's like an empath. She can like feel your feelings. She is one of the most open and honest and interesting human beings I've ever met. And I think that's why I was able to become so close over that dinner, is that we just talked about movies. We just talked about cinema. So I was a little surprised. Now knowing Amanda, it doesn't surprise me at all that she would invite me to her house to watch movies. But a week later, I was sitting in her living room watching Beijing Bicycle, the film. And we just sat there, we ordered food and we watched it, talked about movies. And then I gave her a copy of my short. I was like, hey, sorry if this is weird, but I'm a big fan. Could you just tell me what you think of it? And then she's like, I'm going to watch this. Thank you. She gave me a big hug. A week later, she wrote me saying, I watched your short film. It was beautiful. If you ever wanted to work together on something, just let me know. And I was like, and so fast forward a year later, I'm writing Girlfriend, and there's a role for a mother that, spoiler alert, she's in maybe the first 15 minutes of the film. And I was worried, is she going to be offended that I'm offering her a role? And now this was an offer, by the way. I didn't make her, like, if you're Amanda Plummer, I think you've graduated out of the world of having to come in and audition.
Yeah.
And I changed my whole idea of the character to fit her. And I said, Amanda, it's a small role, but I just want to work with you on something. And I showed her some footage of Evan, and I think that did it. And I think she was just like, yeah, I want to act across that guy. And so those are how I got those three. I know they're all very different stories, but
I think there's a similar energy in her relationship with Evan as her character in The Fisher King, as with Robin Williams' character.
You're right. There is something about a woman who's able to deal with someone who's a handful, right? Who's a little bit different. I wouldn't even say a handful, right? I actually went back and rewatched The Fisher King, and you're just like astounded by how open she was.
She's one of the best things about it, and she's so underrated in that movie.
But the thing about Amanda, and I think maybe this came across in the masterclass she gave in Ireland at the Flaw, like she consistently works with geniuses who constantly call her like there are few actors that while they're actually in the moment forget that we're in a movie. And that's the thing that Evan does too. Because of his cognitive disability, he is unable to be in the film and watching himself acting at the same time. For the moments that he's actually acting between action and cut, he's temporarily oblivious to the fact that there's a camera there because he's so in it. But Amanda was right. Amanda's like, Justin, Evan is doing what it takes years for actors to try to figure out how to do.
That focus, that incredible focus, I don't I like, as an actor and somebody who's worked a little bit as well, it's very rare you find that. It's
nearly impossible. I mean, his acting coach, who was a friend of mine who I studied theater with in college, came out and said, Justin, Evan has this one thing he can do that I think I've been trying as an actor to learn how to do for my whole life, is that he can temporarily forget that it's actually make-believe, and he lives it. Like, he forgets for a second that there's a camera. That's why he went off book so much and improvised so much in the film, is that he forgot for a second that there was a script. He forgot all his lines, and he just went crazy. And I kept all those pieces in the film. But Amanda is one of those. You know what it is? Amanda's got the mind of a child. and I don't mean that in a bad way, I mean it in the absolute best way, is that
in a not growing up, don't grow up, it's a trap, and childlike quality. Yeah,
she can. Here's the thing that she can do that Evan can do. They're the same in this. Amanda Plummer can play make believe. You know how kids can play make believe and it's really happening for them.
Yeah.
Amanda can do it. I don't know what she's able to get rid of all of her adult baggage and just get in the zone. Like, here's the thing. Like, she's been on stage with Michael Shannon, Bill Pullman, some of the greatest, right? And she did a play with Brad Dourif that apparently was one of she was on Broadway. She's won Emmys. I think she's on a new Netflix show now that she's very good in, the Ratchet.
This Sarah Paulson one.
Yeah. I mean, I know she was only on our set for 3 days, but I've never worked with someone like her in my life. The only one that I'd say is close to that in being able to forget temporarily, other than Evan, is Adelaide Clemens from my second film. She was also able to do that, where she forgot temporarily that she was, and she would be stuck in the character. It was crazy. There's also
temporarily brainwashing themselves. I might move on then just quickly because we do have a nice bit of time, but we don't have all day.
Sure.
And just talk about your second feature, and I suppose we'll start with casting and then work backwards or forwards rather. How Ricky Jay is an incredible actor.
Yeah.
For me. I was well aware of him before I knew you were making a movie about him.
Really?
Yeah, of course. I mean, Hard Eight and, fucking Magnolia and so on.
Boogie Nights, all the David Mamet films.
Heist.
Yeah, oh, God. House of Games.
Yeah, but the voiceover alone, I mean, from
Magnolia. Yeah.
Is you still get chills when you hear it now, years and years later.
You imagine getting a voicemail from him on your phone and hearing that voice through your phone, just like, "Hey, it's Ricky. How's it going?"
He's such a great character actor, and a great character, and for those of you who may not know as well, like an incredible world-class magician.
The best sleight of hand artist that ever lived. David Blaine has a photograph of Ricky Jay in his apartment.
Wow. I mean, like the ultimate one-man show, incredible stuff. And then you have Richard Schiff, who's been in every incredible political thriller, every tentpole blockbusters, some of the best political satire out there. Amazing actor. So how do you get them in your roadshow?
Relentlessness. Ricky doesn't, as you might know from knowing his career as a magician and a very, very established author, doesn't need to act anymore. Like he happened to be represented by the agency I was represented by. And I asked my agent just to call him. And it took months. And then finally, we realized he has this manager that reps a lot of musicians and performers, but not a lot of actors. And I wrote a letter to Ricky, handwritten letter, basically saying, like, Ricky, I wrote this role specifically for you. You're a Jewish guy from Brooklyn who went to Cornell University. My dad's a Jewish guy from Brooklyn, and I went to Cornell University. I wrote this role for you. I don't have a second choice. So if you say no, I'm fucked. Sorry for my English there.
All
right. And sure enough, that letter got to his manager and then got to him months later. And his manager called me. He's like, "Yeah, so what's your story about?" And I told him a quick, just send it to him. And then Ricky liked it. He liked the script. He was intrigued by the fact that he didn't know who I was, but I think the letter the fact that I went to his alma mater. He's very proud of going to Cornell University.
Mm-hmm.
He loved that. And I think I just wouldn't stop calling his manager until I at least got a no. And I never got it because I didn't get a no. I just got to I don't know. I got to talk to Ricky. Ricky's a very reclusive guy, you know? And then I think he must have read it because I got a call from his manager. He's like, all right, Ricky's going to have a coffee with you. You're going to have 20 minutes. We'll meet at this hotel. And sure enough, he was there. He and his manager went. And he basically said, look, like, I just want to be comfortable there. I want you to, he had a few things. I want to talk to you about the fighting. I don't know if people know this, but he actually has had a side business where he would do trick photography for films, like all of the optical illusions in Forrest Gump with Gary Sinise's legs. His company did all of those. Like he and his partner would do all of the magic movie, like optical illusions and things with mirrors and trick photography. But he also was a black belt in karate, and
Right.
he also knew how to fight for the camera, like fight choreography for a camera. And he's like, look, I'm getting up there in age, so there's some things I don't want to do. I want a stunt double for the scene where the guy throws me across the room, but I want to make sure that in the scenes where I don't know if this is a spoiler, but there is a scene in which two elderly Jewish men have to beat the shit out of each other over a wonderful family dinner. And he just wanted it all to feel real, and he wanted to make sure that he was going to be taken care of. And with the modest budget that we had for the film, I said, it's my priority. I'll take money out of other departments if you come do my movie. It was more of a win than actually, I think, any other part of the movie making. And that's a big statement because there was so many great collaborators I had on that film. Like you said, Richard Schiff, the two lead kids. I worked with a Class A producer who had an Oscar nomination from Winter's Bone. My cinematographer, who I came up through film school with, she's now off like shooting things like Palm Springs and the Netflix series.
Palm Springs is great. It's really great. I watched it and I loved it recently.
Well, that's my best friend from film school who shot all of my films. So I was working with a great, but like Ricky for me was the reason. Like I will like if nothing else good happened from that movie, I was like I wrote Ricky J a letter. I said that I don't have a second choice. He responded. He did the movie. And he loved it. He was really happy. Upstate New York in the fall is beautiful. He was able to go see his old friends from Cornell after this. We were shooting very close to where both he and I had went to college. He and his wife got to like do some tours, wine tours through upstate New York after the shoot, and he loved it. He loved it. It was great. And to know that was his last film that he did, for me, is still, I mean, it's bittersweet, obviously, but he did some TV after it, but wrote several books. I mean, the guy never stopped working, but it was a great one. And then Richard Schiff was just, we kept calling him, and he loves to work, that guy. He loves to work. Yeah. And I let him know that there were some good golf courses up by where we're shooting, and I think that sealed it.
Yeah, I can imagine. And then obviously you had like Adelaide Clemens and then Joseph Cross.
Casting, just bringing in people from casting director and bringing them in, and yeah. It's funny because we had other actors attached to the three main young roles weeks before the film started, and then scheduling gets in the way. Things happen. Bigger budget films come and swoop in your actor. We originally had in one of the roles we had someone from Game of Thrones, and they departed to go do Hunger Games movie rather than our little film. So we understood. But look, like I worked with three really talented young, like Adelaide. I think people have seen her in a lot of different things. Joseph
She's
Cross.
mesmerizing.
Yeah, and then you Joseph Cross from Lincoln, Milk. He's done some TV since then, and Deborah Ann Wall from True Blood and Daredevil. I mean, some class A talent there. It was a bigger cast than I was used to, but it was the first time, the only time maybe, I've never had a problem with any cast member ever. Like there was obviously other difficulties on that shoot, as there are with every single film you make. But I think The Automatic Hate, my second feature, was the only time I've ever had with not one problem from one actor. We had one early on who way before shooting, who was giving a little bit of trouble, who we let go. That was an experience. Letting go an Oscar nominee, no less.
Wow.
That's all I can say.
I won't push you on it.
Yeah. But let's just say, like, with an independent film where you have 20 days, if you're lucky, to shoot, you got to get people who are down to work, collaborate well. You get one sniff of difficulty, and you gotta let it go.
Yeah, I suppose you do. How do you deal with difficult personalities like that? In general terms, not specifically how you dealt with that situation.
If you're on set already or before the shoot, because if you're before the shoot, I think you let them go. You move on.
And you have to, right? You have to cut the head off the snake, don't you?
I think if they haven't set foot on set and you haven't shot with them yet, if they're truly difficult, I think there are enough difficulties with filmmaking at this budget level of a small budget. We're talking like, the independent film, that you do have to let them go. If they're worth it because of something, then I think you just have to handle it. I tend to handle it head on. Like I've had really bad days with cast members that wasn't necessarily like a difficult personality, just you're stressed. You both have creative ideas. There's sometimes extenuating circumstances like weather, rush for time, or maybe a miscommunication about how a scene was going to go. They thought one thing, I thought another thing. Stress, lack of sleep. You snap at someone snaps back at you. I typically, when that has happened, and it's happened at least once or twice on every project, you just set aside some time and you go head on. And you're like, let's do it. Yell at me. I'll yell at you back. Let's talk about it. You go to their hotel room. Yeah, you don't let it fester. You be like, clearly, I had a day where an actor wasn't speaking to me for the entire day, and we had to talk through the AD. And then when we got done with the shoot of that day, we went and had dinner. And I'm like, all right, I've done something. Let's
go on,
yell. Let's do it, because I'd rather have it out now than have it fester and infect the whole shoot. Let's just do it now. And I think there's an appreciation to that. Like, I don't mind being yelled at or being told that I've done something wrong. I think we all do. And I think it's worked so far. And, that I think you just have to be honest. You have to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, to a fault, I guess. What we're going to do is we're going to take like 5 minutes and let people go out, and this often is the case. We're just going to let people go out and have a quick go to the toilet or like a quick cup of tea and come back. Okay. Is that all right?
Sure.
And then we'll touch on working in Los Angeles and your new feature then, and we'll wrap it up then. All right?
Sounds good.
So we'll take like don't leave, just turn off your monitor and your sound.
I'll just mute myself here. Great.
Yeah. And guys, if you want to start thinking about questions, you can add them in the chat box there on the right-hand side, and we'll get to them before we let Justin go a little bit later. Back in 5, guys. Thanks a mil. How you doing, Gareth? Good to see you. We'll ask him that when he comes back on. Guys, again, thanks a million to everybody for taking the time out to join in the conversation tonight. We really appreciate it, and thank you to Screenskills Ireland for engaging with us and helping us with this new series. Again, if you've questions, just put them in the chat bar on the right hand side, and I would encourage you to hang around for the networking afterwards at 9 p.m. Just to check in with a neighbour and see how they're doing, what they're working on. We are in the middle of a pandemic, after all. They're only short little sessions at about a minute or two, so it'll be very quick and painless, like getting a COVID test. So don't worry too much about it. There's Justin back again. Okay, can you hear me there, Justin? Yeah. You're still muted, I think, there, mate.
Hear me now? There we are.
Can indeed.
All right.
Now we're back. So we were touching on kind of difficult characters and how best to deal or not. Obviously, to deal with it, and as opposed to not dealing with it. What's it like living in Los Angeles as a no nonsense, zero bullshit type of person?
Well, I had a little bit of a practice round here in LA, having gone to film school here. It was a little bit of like dipping my toe in. I credit that for understanding a little bit better how it works out here. I was just surprised. Look, before I moved to LA, my big city that I went to other than Boston was New York. And in New York, there's still like the bustle and hustle for money. But it just became so apparent when I was out here how much actual money is the most important part of filmmaking. And of course, it is important, but like I very quickly learned that there was like 3 movie theaters that would play the films I wanted to see. It's getting better. Look, like now with like a foreign film having won the Oscar, I think there are a lot more movies coming out that are international at the big, like the ArcLight cinema. You know what I mean? But as far as LA, I worked a little bit while in college in New York City, and there was a much more direct kind of no bullshit. Even when I met executives at film companies, they're like, "Look, hey, you're great. We have nothing that you could do for us right now. We have no projects, but let's have a coffee, keep in touch." And then I do the same thing out here in LA. And look, some places are like that, but others are just like I'll never forget one of I was meeting when I signed with my manager and my agent. Okay. I needed to add a lawyer to my team, right? I needed a lawyer to do all of my the contracts, right? I went up this like glass elevator to like the penthouse suite of this Beverly Hills place, and there was legit, no joke, a dude like in boogie shorts and like a suit, like playing golf and like darts, and like he was in his late 50s, dressed like someone that you would see at the beach in high school. And like his little like Harvard law degree.
Spicoli, was it Spicoli?
I don't know. I don't even remember who the guy was. I went on so many meetings, but it was like it was out of like an Entourage like episode of like just some dude, and he was just basically sat me on his huge couch and said all of the great things that all of his great clients and how much money they make. And didn't ask me a question about myself, and then said, you seem great. You seem amazing. You see, like I haven't seen your work, but I hear it's really good. I'm not out of the meet, and like slaps me 5, like fist bumps. I'm not outside of I'm not even at my car. I'm not even at my car yet, and I get a text from my manager saying, hey, I don't know what you said to that guy, but he passed and he says he doesn't want to represent you.
Fucking hell. Okay.
And I was just like, that's funny because he didn't ask me a question about myself. He knew nothing about me other than I got to sit how I nod when he tells me how awesome he is. So I feel like there's a lot of meetings out here, and I don't think this is unique to LA. I think this is just the country, where you go because it's a lot of networking and 1% of it is good, but a lot of it is like, I have to meet this person because my boss thinks I should, or I'm doing a favor to a friend, so I'm going to meet. But like nothing ever comes of it except for like all the money on gas I'm spending and all the days that I lose where I could be writing. It's probably the worst part. It's just the rounds of meetings that go nowhere. That said, there's always that one that is good, that ends up in a true partnership. Like when I had my meeting with the producer who ended up producing my second film, you know? So I think it's good and the bad. You just have to, if you go in with the right mindset that you're just meeting people and building your contacts.
You're meeting people to meet people.
Yeah,
right?
and nothing's going to come of it usually, except for being able to, when people are seeing your work, they say, oh, I met with that guy. He's a nice guy. I might go see his film. I guess that's why. Or if 5 years from now, they have a project for you and they're like, oh yeah, I met that person. That person's great. But there is a certain level of artificiality to all of these meetings where it just feels sometimes like you're just going through the motions, and there's never going to be a project at their company that's right for you, and they're never going to want to finance one of your projects, but you have to take the meetings anyway. And I'm not saying for everything. Look, there are dozens of meetings that have ended up becoming good relationships, friendships, or even working partnerships. But I'd say the great majority are not. And I think you just have to go into your meetings out here like that, understanding that that's the case.
Yeah. Can I ask you just about mindfulness and stuff? I mean, that's going to take, your psyche's going to take a bit of a 1-2 now and again with that. How do you deal with that from a mindfulness point of view? How do you look after yourself?
I think if you go into each meeting saying, how can I get better at this? Like, what can I gain from this? This person's never going to hire me to make a film. Their company's too big and they make films very different than the ones I make. They're never going to finance one of mine. Mm-hmm. What could I do to better myself? And these are the things I remember. Meetings are important to learn how to like engage and learn better how to explain to other people your vision and the way that you see the world and talk about your work. So all of these meetings are an opportunity to have practice doing that. 1. 2, the other that's very important is, even though you might be meeting with someone that's at a company that would never make your work project, they're not going to be there forever. And they may leave and go be, if you can make a fan today of your work, even though their company will never hire you or never pay for one of your films, they could very easily change jobs next year and be able to. This actually helped me once. I took a meeting with an assistant to an agent that was helping me cast my first film. And he just wrote me and said, I really like your work. I've been answering all the calls from my boss and listening in, and I really enjoy your work. Could you get a drink with me some night when I get off work? That guy, I went and we talked about basketball. We talked about films. We became friends. 2 years later, he's an agent at a company representing an actress I'm trying to get my script to. And he picked my phone right up. He said, I'll send the script right to her, and you guys have a lunch set for next week. Great. So that's where these meetings are okay, is that you understand that if you understand that these things are not personal, that nothing comes of them, but it's a long play, and that with some of them, they will. My wife is a TV writer. She met at a company that didn't end up hiring her. The guy at the company loved her, switched jobs, and now is hiring her for a different project right now because he was such a fan of her at the other company that did not hire her. So even though I'm saying it's all terrible and these people are all fake, I'm not saying it's because the people are. I'm saying the system is that more times than not, these companies aren't going to finance your film. Mm-hmm. But the people that you meet with are, except for that lawyer guy I told you about, that was a real crazy, like just a character out of Entourage. I'd say the majority of the people that you meet are good people that really want to make great films and artistic things that say something. They're just at companies that won't let them. Yeah. Right. So just connect with the people. That's the way I would set my mind up. Talk about good films, make friends with this person, find out what they're interested in. If they're good at their job, they're going to be somewhere else in a few years and they might be able to help you.
So it's important to be yourself, obviously, and kind in that regard, because you never know when it's going to come back around.
100%. Even if the person is like the guy playing golf at the penthouse suite, just be nice. Just be nice and ask questions about them. And if asked, explain as best you can with practice the things that you're passionate about making. And in the event that there is a match, 2 years from now, you might be getting a call from that person. Now, a lot of times it won't happen, right? Because who knows if they're going to go to a company that specifically does the work that you do. But even in those cases, it's good practice to get to know people. Like I would say the great majority of these meetings that you have that are fake aren't fake because the people in them are fake. They're fake because their company probably won't let them greenlight your project because it just isn't a match, you know? So I hope I made that clear. It's not that these people, yeah.
It's the artifice in which the structure in which these meetings live in. That's correct. That's fake.
Correct. It's very rarely the people. The people are usually in it because on some level they either studied film, wanted to be in film, love cinema, want to be a producer, want to be a writer. And yeah, that's the thing. They're all really nice. I haven't been to one meeting where someone's a jerk. It's just that sometimes they're disingenuous meetings because the company can't do anything to help you, but they want to just meet you because they have to, because that was what they were told. But even in those cases, it's not that person's fault that you're meeting at all.
Yeah. Don't shoot the messenger. Okay.
Exactly.
Right. Let's get to a couple of questions from the guys before we wrap up.
Sure.
Let me scroll up to see if I'm missing anything. Okay. We've one there from Gareth about representation. How realistic is it for somebody outside the US to get representation over there?
I think it's actually right now, since cinema is becoming so global and foreign films are becoming a little bit more digestible in the United States, I think it is possible. My biggest piece of advice is try to seek out a manager first. Managers have less clients than agents. They're not as focused on the bottom line. They are open to strategizing your career with you, and they're like a good gateway in, and they can help you navigate a world. I'm dealing with this right now. I'm one of 2 editors on my current feature that I'm making in Guatemala. I'm editing with a Guatemalan filmmaker who just is now seeking out representation in the United States because he's actually an established film writer and director, even though he's also a great editor. And my biggest advice to him is getting him set up with a manager first. These people will watch your film. They'll read your script. They have more time. And I think a good manager can really save you a lot of heartache in your life in the United States in representation and film and everything.
Okay. Right. We're going to rattle through some more just quickly there. Now, let me see. We have a big one here from Bernadette Rowe. Justin's writing process from idea to final draft. How long? How many drafts? And do you collaborate with other writers, or do you ultimately rely on script editors?
I have written with a partner a couple times. Once on my second feature, I wrote with Catherine O'Brien, who is a filmmaker out here who just recently made her first feature as a director. My first film, I wrote myself, but obviously taking into account the life of Evan and the characters involved, I tend to write out the story first, not in a script, but actually in like a 2 to 3 page Word document where I just agree with myself on the story. I say, here's the beginning, the middle, and the end. Sometimes if I have an idea for a scene, I write out the scene, but it's usually just a list of bullet points, because I think that final draft script document doesn't really show a story as well, because what's featured the most on one of those documents is the dialogue. And for me, the dialogue always comes last. I'm figuring out the story first. How many drafts, man, I'm rewriting the script right up until shooting, and then sometimes during shooting. As you write it and then you start casting it and you start doing auditions, some of your bad writing kind of shows up and you're like, that line's terrible. Now that I've heard someone say it, cutting it, changing it. But also the films I make tend to be with a lot of non-professional actors. So my scripts are always a guide where they can change the lines as needed. And what I did in my most recent project is I workshopped all the scenes with my non-professional actors and recorded them. And then whatever they improvised, I actually put into the script. The pieces I liked, I put into the script. So I'd say there were infinite amounts of scripts, but for my last film. But for my first two, I think we ended up shooting the 8th or the 9th draft of each. However, every time I just go through and touch up a scene or something, I don't call it a new draft. I call it like, instead of draft 6, 6.1, 6.2, 6.3. If I go up and clean up all of the bad dialogue in a draft, I'll give it a new number. I'll give it like 7. But then if I take draft 7 and I go in and just touch up a couple things, I call it 7.1. So
Right.
so I believe we shot draft like 5.8, but I got up to 8, you know, like because there's small change. So it depends on what you consider a draft. But I don't believe that anything can stay the same, has to stay the same, except for the general story. But the general story, I typically start in a text document, just figuring out the scenes and the story first. When I finally go to a script phase, I've at least vetted it like 5 or 6 times, the draft of the story. And then with a collaborator, I think it depends on the project. I really needed someone for The Automatic Hate to write with because it was very close to my real life. I really needed collaborators, plural, on the Guatemalan project because I was making a film in a culture that is not mine. I live in Guatemala part-time, but I don't live there full-time, and I needed the actors in the film as well as my producer, who is Guatemalan, to help with some of the realism. Like, would this actually happen? How would you go about this? And then the kids that I worked with who come from like the more dangerous parts of this town I lived in, I relied on them to help me rewrite anything that felt false, like a non-Guatemalan writing a story. So the script was developed over months, over a year of research and interviews, and then countless revisions based on them reading it and saying, you got this all wrong. We would never pull a gun on someone on this street. We would have to do it over here. We'd have to do that. You know what I mean? Like, and down to the script, like, and, you know, I'm rewriting it now in the editing right now, you know, as we go through, it's falling away. So the long answer, or the short version of that answer, is many drafts, always the story first. And then depending on the project, I'll always invite someone in to help me with the places where I think I'm stuck too much in my own perspective.
Great answer. Thanks so much. Okay, here we go. Tess.
There's Sean has one there. Yeah. No.
Hold on. Am I missing somebody there?
Sean Delaney.
Oh yeah, there you go. Beg your pardon, Sean. Yeah, what aspect of the film you're making is the most important to focus
on? It depends in which phase. At the beginning, it's the story of what happens, and then the places that it takes place. I really put a lot of where it takes place before I actually start writing. All of my films, including this new one, I've scouted the locations like extensively before writing a single word. That matters because I care a lot about the visuals of where a movie takes place. And then after that, I think finding the right people to be in it. I couldn't have started Girlfriend without Evan, right? He's the most important part of that project. For The Automatic Hate, it was more autobiographical story of me with some fictional embellishments, but I really I needed Catherine there for the story. Really was more what happens there. But with this new project, it was the locations with my cinematographer, finding all the places and then meeting the kids. And once I met the kids that the movie was about and had them take me through the locations, I was like, oh, this is what it's like to live here. This is what it's like to be in a gang here. This is what it's like to rob people. This is what it's like to survive on the streets here. This is what it's like to go to church in this neighborhood. But I had to have the people who lived there take me through the locations, and then I could write it. So those were the aspects for the project: characters, the story, and then the locations.
Okay, fantastic. We'll move on there. What advice would you give to a young writer? This is Tess. What advice would you give to a young writer starting out who's trying to have a script bought, made into a film, etc.? What other platforms apart from film festivals are good for showcasing, sharing your work?
There are so many like screenplay contests and grants now that can get your film prizes. I believe certain film festivals actually have these, and then there are screenwriting labs as well. For example, Sundance Screenwriters Lab and Television Writers Lab. You apply, and if your film gets selected, you get a mentor. They help you network and get it out, and they help you with drafts of it. I would say start submitting to places like the Sundance Screenwriters Lab. There's a grant that actually I won with the Guatemalan film that I won $10,000 just to spend whatever I wanted on to help me start the project off just from the script. They liked the script. It's called Screencraft, and they have awards and grants for almost every category of script: short, TV pilot, horror, genre films, action, comedies, and it's screencraft.org. We won that one. I would do a deep dive if I were you on finding which screenplay competitions and festivals that have them. The other thing I would say is if you have a feature that you've written and you wanted to maybe get people interested, another route is to maybe write a short that is either similar to it or a condensation of it, and see if you're not a filmmaker, could make it. And if it's easier for people to watch a short film than to read a whole script. If your short film got enough attention at a festival, you could then say, hey, there's a feature version of this. Would you like to read it? And there's a lot of different ways. But I would look into those two avenues first.
That's an interesting strategy. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Can anyone's film be in a film festival, or does there need to be specific criteria or specifications? Can anyone's film be in a film?
To the best of my knowledge, if you send in a film and you pay the submission fee, you can have your film, you can send it in. I think that doesn't mean to be submitted or to be selected. I believe that the film it's always a subjective thing with a festival, whether they select it, but to my knowledge, anyone could submit their film to any film festival.
Darren, maybe you might want to expand on that down below, just very quickly, just to be more specific, if you want a more specific answer. It's getting close to wrapping up time. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
This was a pleasure. I hope some of it was helpful.
Oh, absolutely. Justin, hopefully now when the world reopens, Justin will be coming over and giving some master classes and lectures for Film Network Ireland. So we're really looking forward to that in the future. We've been planning that for a while. Now that's probably in a year and a half when he's finished his festival run, or maybe if he's stopping
or
by.
maybe if I'm passing through, we find a way to cross through Ireland. It would be great. The last master class I gave overseas was one in South Korea, so this will be a little bit easier. But I would love it. I would love to come there. It's been many years since I've been to Dublin. I've been more recently to Galway, where I saw you. But it would be great. I would love to come.
Mm-hmm. And you're always welcome. Guys, where can people see? Where can people see your previous work?
So I think if people want to see my short film, the one that like started my career, it's on Vimeo for free. Do you guys get Vimeo here?
Mm-hmm.
Great. I'm sure it's everywhere. Yeah. I'll put the link here in the sidebar. There's a website called, first of all, you can rent, do you guys have Amazon Prime there?
Certainly, yeah.
Okay, so you can probably rent both Girlfriend and Automatic Hate on Amazon Prime. There's also, it's for free on a few different sites depending on VPN or whether did you guys have Tubi? Tubi.tv?
No, I've never heard of that. I'm not sure.
Okay. There are several websites, including Amazon and iTunes, where you can rent both Girlfriend. And Girlfriend actually was released in Ireland by Element. They put it out for a couple weeks opposite Harry Potter, unfortunately, on Christmas Day at the Lighthouse in Dublin. Funny story. So it came out on Christmas Day many years ago. I want to say 2012 in Dublin on the same day as Harry Potter. I told Lenny, who I met through the festival route. He was one that helped me introduce me to Element to have them put it out. Wow. He went to see it, but we got some reviews in Ireland because of the release. And more than one critic actually talked about how it felt like I was influenced heavily by Garage as a film, which I thought was funny because I actually did see Garage in Italy at a festival the time I met Lenny, and it might have accidentally in my subconscious, the film's very green. It has to do with like a very different kind of loner type who wants to get with it's a very simple story. I don't know, but I found that really funny. And then a couple years later, I'm taking my dog to a cafe down the street from my house here in Los Angeles, and I hear a very loud Irish accent ordering coffee in my local. I go, I know that voice from somewhere. I turn around, and my dog has walked over to a young boy who's playing with my dog, and who's sleeping now on the couch right there, if you can see her. Birdie, she's asleep. But and the boy is standing next to who else but Colin Farrell.
Oh, no way.
Colin Farrell is petting my dog, and we get on a whole conversation about the Lighthouse, and that tells me how the Lighthouse Cinema that he used to go to in Dublin, if you play a little indie that was under $1 million, like Girlfriend opposite Harry Potter, he's like, that's what they call it, the Lighthouse, the counter programming. And but he was a big fan. I gave him a copy of Girlfriend. His son has some cognitive disability. That's he's a very sweet kid, but it meant a lot to it.
Angel syndrome, I think it's called, or Angel?
Something like that. Yeah, but he was a lovely kid. He really liked my dog, so we bonded, became friends. So now when I see him in the cafe, because you can actually hear, even though you can take your coffees to go here in LA. They don't let you stay, but you can do the takeaway here. Run into him now and again, but he his endorsement of Girlfriend, and then telling me all about the particularities of the Lighthouse cinema was really helpful for me. I thought you enjoyed the whole Ireland-U.S. kind of connection here in Los Angeles.
I know dozens of people that have a similar story. He's one of the nicest people working.
I can't tell you. I see him maybe once a month because he doesn't come very much. But when he does, he remembers my name. His son pets the dog. Like he's a lovely guy. And my neighbor apparently now. He must live somewhere nearby.
He probably has a pal there. Listen, we're gonna wrap it up. Thanks so much, guys. If you see on the left there, you'll see a networking icon. Jump in there. Maybe Justin might hang around for a little while and say hello to one or two people, and might answer one or two questions of your own. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. It's been a long time coming, and we'll do something again hopefully in the future, mate.
Thank you, Paul. The pleasure was mine. It was really fun.
Okay, thanks a million. See you guys next. See you next door in the other room. All the best, mate. Take care. Thanks for your time.